Welcome everyone. I am pleased to present to you a new uncapped demon form life stacking Tecrod's build guide. The build includes highlights such as being able to very comfortably hit 300 plus demon form stacks, hit 3 million plus sheet DPS in your abilities, subsequently being able to pretty much one-shot bosses. Can achieve anywhere from 100 to 200% movement speed. Has no move cast penalty, or very close to it, 92%. And can also have 100 plus rarity. That's the main highlights. Before I jump into the details, as always, really trying to hit that 1000 sub mark, so please like and subscribe if you find this video helpful. So what you see here is a demonstration of a relatively juiced map, and as you can see, the movement speed and penalty is just phenomenal, and honestly very much a highlight of the build, as well as the uncapped demon form stacks, which are currently sitting at about 240 if you look in the top left. I know most people look at the demon form stacks and that's the big draw card for most people, but I cannot stress enough that once you experience what it means to move at 2-3 times the speed with no cast penalty, it is like playing a completely different game, so I highly recommend that. But the build is flexible and does allow for pretty much a free flexible 20-30 odd passive tree points if you don't want to go down the movement speed route. I'll quickly just show also a demonstration of Xesht. You can see the sheet DPS there on the frostbot on the left, already almost hitting 2 million plus. Once we build up a little bit, building up just for the sake of a demonstration. This is completely overkill for Xesht. You could kill him with 100 stacks or even less, but you could just see there 2.7. I've got that easily over 3 million at one point, but honestly that's just all show. You don't in practice need that much. You can one-shot Xesht with a lot less. Few people in some of my previous videos have been going, well, Xesht is all well and good, everyone shows that, but Simulacrum's arguably one of the harder bits of content. So here, without even having Snake Pit on, so just running my rarity setup, I believe this is there you go, stage 15. I'll just play this through just to show that even with frost bolts piercing through everything and not really exploding due to Snake Pit, it still absolutely rolls the content. And this is actually something that I farm quite regularly on this build to make some of my currency. And yeah, very, very simple. So I'll jump into the breakdown of the build and I will separate it into 3 sections. Firstly, the mandatory pieces. Secondly, recommended starter gear. And then finally, what I'm personally running or what I'd classify as top end. I still have room to improve some of my gear, but it is hitting upon the top end. So 3 different sections. We'll start off with the mandatory. I've done this in Maxwell. I'll try and zoom in to make life a little bit easier. Well, that's a bit too much. So in terms of mandatory pieces, we have 4. That is firstly we get rid of that advertisement, Undying Hate Timeless Jewel, specifically tribute to Tecrod. What that allows us to do is to convert our any keystone passive, but in our case the one up in the top right here, which is typically Chaos Inoculation, to Sacrifice of Blood. And without going into too many of the details, we convert our spell casts, which are typically take mana, into life. This plays into this keystone. The more life you spend, the more regen you get. You stack that with some life regeneration rate as well as high HP values and the Wrath Pit Sacred Globe to, in essence, reach regen rates of 10, 15,000 plus per second, which supports our demon form reaching high stacks. And it also plays into getting a lot of DPS through a support gem, which I'll get into. But Tecrod's number one thing. Secondly, we want the Rafbiff Globe. That provides plenty of benefits with our life stacking, as well as, in particular, our spells costing a percentage of our max life, which links into our support gem, which we need, which is Atalui's Bloodletting. This works like life tap. It converts or blood magic converts your mana cost into life costs, and then gives you a substantial uncapped scaling of physical damage extra based on how much that skill costs. So you're trying to raise the cost of whatever skill you're using as much as possible, which, like I said, the 6% from Rafbiff plays in. And then we do a number of other things to also raise that cost further, which I'll dive into later. So Tecrod's, Rafbiff, we're then getting Comb's Heart, just a massive, massive amount of life. We're trying to stack life, so there's that. And finally, Veil of the Night, again, another 50% increase life. Try and get the enchant for life regeneration rate. This is a very cheap unique. You can get this, including the enchant, for 1 div. And those pieces, if you sum it up, people always ask about entry kind of costs. Tecrod's at the moment of recording is about 9 div, Rafbiff about 6, Combs 4, Veil 1, and the Bloodletting support 3, which totals 23 div. I'd strongly recommend, if you do have the currency for it, try and get slightly better versions. So Rafbiff, you can try and get some sort of corrupted enchant, get a second socket, which is what I did. Combs, I personally got a 19% chaos enchant. You could get another socket. You could get a higher max life roll. It can go upwards of, I think, 18,000. It starts to get expensive at that point though, or very expensive. Veil, as I said, try and get the life regeneration rate enchant. Alternatively, you could get another socket. The support and the jewel, there's not much there. You could get a corrupted jewel, I guess, but you're looking at about at least a base entry cost of 23 div. Factoring in a few of the starter pieces, a decent wand, you're probably looking at around 30 div all up. So that's the starting point. Then in terms of the supplementary pieces on top of that I would recommend, rings with max life and chaos resistance. It's worth highlighting. Veil completely removes our elemental resistances. Don't freak out. We're going to have so much life and life recovery and energy shield that you just don't feel squishy at any point. So rings, life, chaos resistance. We still want to cap our chaos resistance. Life, chaos resistance. This is base. Some nice things to have, a cast speed. That's pretty much it on the ring. Life, chaos resist, cast speed. You want plus levels on your amulet. You want your max life percentage increase and max life total. Cast speed. You want plus levels on your wand, crit, and cast speed. Max life everywhere. Get some movement speed on your boots. Crit damage bonus on your gloves helps. And that's a starting point. The most important out of the supplementary pieces of gear are to cap out your chaos resistance, get the max life rolls on your amulet, and the plus levels on your wand as well. The plus levels are important because not only do they increase the damage of your abilities, but it also increases the cost of them, which then increases the damage bonus you get from Atalui's. So that's the recommended starting gear. Try and get, or you fill out your charm slots. I've removed my high-end charms here, but you take the thawing, maybe stun resist, and maybe then the rarity charms. In terms of your passive tree, I've again broken it down into a starter or core set of passives. And then the top end, where I personally run, which is the movement speed variant. I could add a third one in here, but I'll just leave it up to everyone. If you don't care about movement speed, you can spend all of these points that are invested down here, typically into movement speed, anywhere else that you want. So there's a lot of room for flexibility. But focusing firstly on the core setup, as I said, the key piece being Tecrods, and I highly recommend placing it in this position because it has a keystone, one travel point away from our pathing, so it is the highest, or the less passive point cost placement that you can have. Beyond that, we're trying to save as many points as possible, so we're just doing big pathing up the middle and around the edges, picking up jewel slots as we go. We pick up some max energy shield nodes here, here, and here. The most important nodes in the starter setup, I would say, are firstly Zealot's Oath keystone. That allows us to benefit from our massive life regeneration rate, and it allows it to overflow into our energy shield. So again, since we don't have any element to resist, people may freak out, but any damage you sustain, you almost instantly recover because we've got such a high life regeneration rate that then coupled with Zealot's Oath, it tops up our energy shield the moment we lose it. Another important passive is Overzealous, a lot amount of cast speed and increases our mana costs. Again, higher costs, better benefit from Adalui's Bloodletting. This cluster down here works well with our life, topping up our life regeneration rate, big high value node here, as well as, again, more life costs and a bit of spell damage. Pick up a little bit of life regeneration for 1 point here. Some people, I will highlight, go the route of going for the Arcane Surge. I personally, not a fan of the 4 seconds, although arguably we're going through the map so quick with the movement speed, we could benefit. But if you did go down that route, you pick up these 3 points to get the Arcane Surge, and then the 3 points here to have the ability to gain the Arcane Surge on crit, as well as bumping up its effect. We pick up a little bit of crit here. Just simply, it's a high value, 50%. And I personally like this cluster running Spell Slinger. It gives a tremendous amount of energy gain as well as crit hit chance. And then finally we get this max life and life recovery rate Chakra of Life node. Again, high value, bumping up our life by bumping up our life regen. And then, like I said, just picking up jewels. In the starter setup, I haven't edited these jewels. They're just the jewels I've been running for my movement speed, but you could just run basic sapphires with crit hit chance, max energy shield. You could run rubies with life regeneration rate, I believe they roll with. There's plenty of options. In terms of our ascendancy, we are running the uncapped demon form, so the full 4 points invested into demon form, as well as you taking Baitit's Hand. Because we're stacking life, because some of these pieces are armor-based pieces and don't have energy shield, this conversion provides us with a tremendous amount of energy shield. I believe it's in the vicinity of 2,000-3,000 energy shield in my case personally, and it'll probably be quite similar for yourselves. So that's the starting point. Moving on to end game gear. The only difference is the cost, really. There are quite some substantial pieces here. Headhunter costs in the vicinity of 70 odd div. Getting proper 2-3 socket movement speed boots will cost you 20-30 div, if not more. I'm not sure, they may have gone up in price. Rite of Passage charms cost 100 plus div. But a lot of these things are optional, so you can just do them piece by piece. In terms of progressing towards a movement speed variant, your most important starting point, I would say, is your boots. Get at least a 2-socket pair of boots with increased effect of socketed items, and then you place movement speed, socketable. I can't remember if they're runes. It shows 15% here, but with the 3 sockets, it's actually 30. I can quickly show you in game. Actually, it'd probably be better to show the gear here. Boots would probably be your number one starting point. Then you want to probably upgrade your wand, get a +5 or 6. I'm running Frostbolt. I will highlight you can run almost any spell setup that you want. So plus levels on your wand, cast speed, crit, then spell damage would be ideal. So this isn't a great wand. I'm only keeping it because I've actually managed to sanctify a wand and get +6 levels, but ideally I'd probably get more value out of a +5 with a much higher spell damage roll. Get a better amulet. I'm still running a +2 simply because I was only testing out the build in the last day or two. That'll be my next point of call, get a +3 there, but very similar rolls, get a max life, etc. Cast speed. Headhunter is, I'd probably say Snake Pit and Maligarrows are your next point of call. Probably even before the movement speed. Snake Pit, especially if you're running Frostbolt. Probably only if you're running Frostbolt is tremendous value rather than your Frostbolts piercing everything. They don't pierce anymore and causing their explosion, which almost does 2 times as much damage. And then forking off and doing more damage and more explosions. Maligarrows is we're not investing in any crit damage in our passive tree because we're investing all the points into movement speed. Our very high value just sets our crit damage bonus at 250, a massive multiplicative damage bonus. Headhunter is, once you get to this point where you can afford top end items, is just a tremendous amount of fun. Gives you stacks and stacks of buffs. You get buffs to your defense. You can get hasted, giving you 30-40% movement speed, cast speed. It's just crazy. And then at the very top end, your rite of passage, Spirit of the Stag. This is just huge amounts of benefit, 15% movement speed, 20% extra damage, and 30% skill, which is cast speed. So huge. And you almost have 100% up time on this, 19-20 seconds every time you kill a rare. It's amazing. If you don't want to run Snake Pit, you could also run a high rarity Breach Ring. So I've got my setup such that I've still got my Chaos Resistance capped and I can just swap these two in and out. I'll use Snake Pit for pinnacle content, so Simulacrum and Xesht and pinnacle bosses, and I'll typically run maps with the rarity ring just to maximize the currency drops. So that's endgame gear. In terms of the passives, as I said, nothing pretty much changes in the top section. All we do is we branch off from here and we pick up all of these movement speed penalty reduction nodes, some cast speed, movement speed, etc., movement speed. So we run also from nothing with Val Pact. So only saves us a couple of points, but we need all those points, and we pick up these two high value, especially momentum. Momentum by itself, since we're running an armor-based chest, there's a hidden movement speed penalty involved in that. This point by itself gives you about 10 plus movement speed, so huge. So that's pretty much it in terms of the tree. This whole bottom section is all movement speed related. The whole top section is your core setup. Jewels, again, will depend on whether you're focusing on movement speed or damage or regen. I've got the vast majority of my jewels all running some sort of movement speed, projectile damage, projectile speed. I'll typically try and find movement speed, projectile damage for your emeralds. Lastly, gems. As I mentioned, I am running a cold setup, but you could almost one-to-one interchange the frost bolts that I use with anything, frost darts, fireballs. Spark would arguably be probably the most effective ability to run, but lightning gear wands are ridiculously expensive, so that puts a lot of people off. And secondly, Spark has been such a meta ability for so long that a lot of people are bored of it, including myself. I personally run Frostbolt, and the main supports that you're running in your self-cast ability are first and foremost Adelui's Bloodletting, Mobility is optional. It is highly recommended if you're going down the movement speed route. Zenith, we're using life for our abilities, so we don't touch our mana, so we just get a flat 30% bonus, as well as having a fantastic cost multiplier. Again, we are trying to make our abilities cost as much as possible. You can see here I have 4,500 unreserved life. One cast is almost over about 1,000 odd life per cast. We're trying to bump that up as much as possible to get the full benefit of Adderluy's. If we look at the tooltip, you can see out of the total damage, the physical damage from Adderluy's takes up, what's that, about 50% of the damage, if not more. So high cost multiplier, 30% more damage multiplier, because we're always above our 90% mana. Valentis propulsion, we're running a lot of cast speed, so we get a tremendous amount of projectile speed. That may be for Spark, or Spark would actually benefit from it, but if I just let my recoup ramp up. What the projectile speed does, it just allows you to clear a map faster, and also, well, especially in the movement speed variant, when you're moving so fast, you can see I'm almost beating it as is, but it just allows it to stay more in front of you. And as I said, the amount of projectile speed you get is huge, 110% in my case. Completely optional still at the end of the day. You could run, probably the best substitute for this would be Unleashed with a massive 150% cost multiply, giving you a much, it'll probably give you quite a substantial DPS raw number bonus. But honestly, even as you can see here, sitting in human form, Frostbolt is over 200,000 DPS. You're almost one-shotting you are one-shotting everything just in human form. Everything else is just flex and flavor on top at the end of the day. So, but anyway, I'll continue on. And lastly, Science Tempo just gives you a wild shards effect, which is the 8, I believe, projectiles around you, which just helps if your map clear. As I said, some potential substitutes include Unleashed. There's a whole bunch of other options as well. In Spellslinger, so Spellslinger is not required, but I very highly recommend you get through a Dueling Wand. It just gives you a free meta ability. The energy builds up simply from casting your main self-cast, and it allows you to drain your life quicker, which lets you build more life regen, which lets you build more demon form stacks. I'm just running another Frostbolt in there. Life tap, important. We're not running blood magic. We're saving passive points and not navigating to blood magic on the passive tree, which is typically down here. So we're saving all of these points, and we're just running life tap in all of our abilities. Keep in mind, Adderluy's gives a life tap effect. So life tap, Rakiata's Flow, very expensive support, not exactly needed, but I happen to have one, so I run it. The Spellslinger isn't running Adderluy's, so it doesn't have the massive damage benefit from that. So Radiata's just by itself gives a massive damage boost by inversing all of the mobs' resistances. Mobs in tier 15, 16 maps, I think at a base run at 30 or 40% resistance. If you run then a map which is Waystone, which is modded with further monster resistance, you're almost at times getting a 75% multiplicative bonus just from this support gem. Boundless Energy just for more energy, so Spellslinger cast more often, and Wild Shards for the AoE. Could run almost anything in this last slot, or in these two slots in general. As I said, Spellslinger is mostly there for draining more life to get more life regen. Frostwall, just simply a support to allow our Frostbolts to crash into, especially for Pinnacle bosses. Completely supportive, don't really need it. You only pretty much use it on Pinnacle bosses. I won't show all the supports. You can check that in the max roll guides. The only thing I'll highlight again, life tap. Likewise on our temporal chains on a weapon swap, I won't show that. You can have a look in the guides. but life tap again, and then flame wall you can use on pinnacle bosses, life tap again, and that's all your supports. Lastly, you'll see I've got Arc and Spark down here. These are simply 5-socket abilities which I had spare, and the only reason I'm using them is because I've enchanted Gem Enthusiast on my amulet, which gives you max life and max movement speed if you have 10 red and 10 green supported gems. So to hit that 10 supported for dex and strength, I've just thrown some empty support gem sockets abilities in here and just fill them out with dex and strength to hit those 10 caps to get the benefit of Gem Enthusiast in the anoint. And that's it. I've tried to be as quick as possible. Most of the details will be in the guide. As I said, I've broken it down into the core, starter, and end game. You can feel free to look through some of my previous videos. The only thing lastly I'll leave you with is a bit of a gameplay tip, and that is, as you notice, when I first start off, I can almost not cast anything. What you need to do before you start a map is sit there for a couple of seconds and just allow your life regen to ramp up. You can see the value in the left here. So if I just stop for a second, it'll trickle down. This is the effect. This is what Tecrod is giving you. But then as you start to cast and the life regen starts to layer upon itself, that value slowly builds and builds and builds until you reach a point where it reaches such high values that it maxes out. And you want to do this before you start a map because, as I said, we're running no elemental resistances. If you get damage, you want your energy shield almost immediately to fill back up through Zealot's Oath, and in order to do that, you need your life regen to be nice and high. You can't be sitting down here barely casting and your life regen not filling out your globe and allowing Zealot's Oath to do its work. And that's about it. Again, like, subscribe if you found the content enjoyable. Hope you like the build, has the success of it. It's probably arguably a little bit easier and user-friendly than the life recoup route that I've shown previously. As I said, the starting cost looking at around 30 odd div. So best of luck to everyone. Enjoy. Highly recommend the movement speed variant. As I stressed before, once you've experienced no cast penalty, high movement speed, it feels like a completely different game. You'll clear maps 2 to 3 times as fast. It's just feels like a completely different game, a lot of fun. Anyway, enjoy. All the best.